Okay, so this is what we had, M1, M2, M3 and M4. This is the general cascode circuit, and we are trying to find out where are the poles, where are the zeros. We already know what is the DC gain, right? We already have done the DC analysis. Short circuit current is GM times the input voltage, and output resistance is GM2 times RDS2 RDS1 in parallel with GM3 times RDS3 RDS4. Okay, so product of these two will give you the gain of the circuit, the DC gain. Now we are also interested in the poles and zeros. So to do the poles and zeros, we go step by step. We say let's first find out GM of S. This is the transconductance, and let's find out R out of S. Okay, we won't call it R out anymore, we'll call it Z out. Right? This is our strategy. So first step is we want to do the short circuit current. Okay, so when I apply a short circuit, I want to compute GM of S. I apply a short circuit. I apply an input source, and this time I am no longer interested in the DC value. I am just interested in where are the poles, where are the zeros. I already know the DC value. Alright, so I don't want to do the exact computation of all that RDS, all that stuff is not here. Only where are the poles, where are the zeros. So to do that, first I recognize that M3 and M4 are completely shorted out. Okay, so I throw them out of the picture. They are no longer needed. So this is significant simplification already done. And now I want to see where are the different capacitors. What are the significant capacitors? So if I look at M1, CGS is not significant because input to ground, it's a capacitor across a voltage source. CGB is also not significant. CSB is not significant. Source to body is not significant because both are at ground. Body to drain is significant, and gate to drain is significant. Okay, so this is the first step. Second step, you look at M2. Gate to source is significant, and it is going to come in parallel with drain to body of device 1. Source to body of device number 2 is also going to add to that. Okay, what about drain to body? Both sides are grounded. It's not significant. What about drain to gate? Drain to gate also is not significant because both sides are grounded. Gate to body? Gate to body is also not significant, both sides are grounded. Alright, so this is my basic picture. This is all that I have. Now I need to compute the poles and the zeros. It looks like there is going to be a 0. Okay, so if there is a 0, you can easily compute the 0. Typically what happens is, if there is a capacitor across one particular device of transconductance GM, then the 0 is going to be at plus GM by CGB1. Okay, you can do the long computation. It's not really a long computation, it's one Kirchhoff's law. You can do it and you will find the same result. We did this in the last class. Alright, so we have a right half plane 0 over here. Now we want to compute the pole. We recognize that there is only one node in the circuit. Everything else is ground or input voltage. Agreed? There is only one node. This node. So if there is one node, there is going to be only one pole in this whole business. Okay? And that pole is going to come because of that particular node, because of the impedance seen at that particular node. Now if I understand this much, then I can say that okay, let me compute the impedance that I see at that node, at that particular node. Impedance means resistance and capacitance. What is the resistance that you see at that particular node? How do you compute impedance at a particular node? You ground the input, you nullify the input. If it's a current source, you open it. If it's a voltage source, you ground it. Okay. So I nullify the input, which means that I throw this out. Okay? And now, suddenly, CGB1 appears in parallel with the rest. Alright, now that this happens, I want to find the impedance at that particular node. What is the resistance that I see at that node? RDS1 in parallel to what? 1 by GM2. Okay? In parallel with RDS2. It's approximately equal to 1 by GM2. Okay, this is the resistance that you see, and the capacitance that you see is this, which means that the pole is going to be at minus 1 by RC. Okay, this factor is the contribution of the pole, and the factor that is the contribution of the zero is this quantity. There is a minus sign, huh? Don't miss the minus sign. Okay? So this is the pole and the zero, and with this you need to multiply the DC gain, the DC transconductance. That's the complete expression. So how much is the DC transconductance? It's basically you want to find out the current that's coming through this wire, etc., etc. Okay, that's approximately equal to GM1. We know that. right? So this is the complete expression. Okay? Any questions so far? This is the expression for my transconductance only. I have found out what is capital GM of S. This entire complete thing. Any questions? Yes. Nodes means yes. If you recognize that there are two poles. Yes. This is okay? So far so good? Alright. Now we move on to the next thing, next important thing, and that is Z out of S. So once again I'm going to redraw my and now all the nodes, all the gates of the 4 devices are at ground because you have nullified the input voltage source. This is the Norton equivalent method, right? You nullify the input voltage and you nullify all the voltage sources. This is what you are left with. Okay, and now you look up, you'll see some impedance, you'll see RDS3. First of all, let's look at the different capacitors present. So if you look at the different capacitors present, let's look at M1. Let's start from M1. CGS1 is not significant, both sides are ground. CBS1, body to source of 1, not significant. Gate to body of 1, not significant. Gate to drain of 1, and drain to body of 1. Okay, now let's look at device number 2. Gate to source of 2. It's going to come in parallel to the rest. Body to source of 2. It's going to come. Gate to body of 2, not significant. Gate to drain of 2, yes, and it's going to come at the output node. Drain to body of 2, it's going to come in parallel with this. Okay, 3 and 4 are exactly identical to 1 and 2, so I won't do this detailed thing. I'm just going to write the results. Okay? So now you look in from outside and look downwards. First of all, you have already got a capacitor. At the output node, there is a capacitor. Leave that aside. Okay, let's look in further. Okay, beyond the capacitor. Beyond the capacitor, if you look downwards, you will see GM2 times RDS2 times the impedance that is at the bottom. Okay, so that impedance is the combined effect of RDS1 and all the rest. the capacitance. Okay? So what do you think is going to happen? You are seeing downwards, you are looking downwards. What you see is GM2 RDS2 times RDS1 in shunt with some capacitors. Let's call it C. Let's call it C1. Is this the same as the same thing? Why didn't I multiply both terms? Impedance of capacitance is proportional to 1 by the capacitance. So this is okay. This is okay with everyone. Then I can say that this is what is there. When I look in from outside and look downwards, this is what I see. I see a resistor in parallel with a capacitor. A large resistor in parallel with a small capacitor. Similarly, when I look upwards, I see GM3, RDS3, RDS4. This is my resistor when I look upwards, and my capacitor is the corresponding capacitor over there, up there, which I am going to call C2 divided by GM3 RDS3. Okay, this is when I look upwards. Okay, so the combined effect of all this is the parallel combination of the 4 of these things. So the combined effect is going to be GM2 RDS2 RDS1 in parallel with GM3 RDS3 RDS4. This is my resistance. This is the resistance quantity in parallel with two capacitors in parallel, they add up. Is this okay so far? So from outside, basically you are seeing a resistor and a capacitor. You are also seeing that output capacitor. Okay, so you add that capacitor to this existing capacitor. So you see one resistor and one capacitor, and that gives you just one pole. Yes. Yeah. Is there any flaw in this? Is there any flaw in my arguments so far? Is there any reason not to believe what I said? Which approximation? Right. So that is the catch here, that I have used a crucial approximation that GM2 RDS2 RDS1 plus RDS2 plus RDS1 is approximately equal to GM2 RDS2 RDS1. That's a crucial approximation. When you do it that way, you will actually come up with more poles. Okay? So in reality, there are indeed more poles. You will get 3 poles. The fact of the matter is that the remaining 2 poles are at very, very high frequencies, much, much higher frequencies than this particular pole, probably 20 times higher frequency. Okay? Which is why I have approximated it out. I'm not considering it. This itself is going to be a very high frequency. Do you or do you not agree? A large resistor in shunt with a small capacitor. It's C2 by 20, C1 by 20, right? It's a very small capacitor. The extra parasitic 2 poles that are going to come will be at even higher frequencies, 20 times higher frequencies. Do you agree? So there is nothing wrong by saying that there are 3 poles here. To start with, there are 3 nodes, there should be 3 poles. There is nothing wrong with that. It's just that those 2 poles, because of the 2 other nodes, are at such high frequencies that I can throw them off. Agreed? We'll add it to this. You add it to this. I didn't take it because of lack of space. And you have to do it. Okay? So when there are numbers involved, you'll have to do the computations. If you know the values of CGS, etc., then you will do the computations, find out where the exact locations of the poles and you will have of the whole system. Right? That's going to be an exam problem. So I'm not going to do it now. Alright, so this is understood. So we have got 1 pole because of this, 1 pole and a 0 because of the transconductance. So the net system has 2 poles and a 0. Is that good news, bad news? You think it's bad news? Yes, it is bad news. Why is it bad news? So Bode plot, 0 is the bad news. It's a right half plane 0. So it's going to further decrease your phase as opposed to increasing your phase. Are all of you comfortable with Bode plots? No? Yes? Yes? No? No? Okay. This is essential for this course, so I'm just going to quickly go through. So Bode plots are basically a way to describe the frequency response. So if you have a function h of s, Bode plots are a way to describe it graphically. Describe h of s graphically. Actually, we don't bother about h of s. We prefer talking about h of j omega. Okay? So you replace s with j omega, you go on the j omega axis. So Bode plot is a way to describe h of j omega graphically. Now, there are a few crucial things to understand about Bode plot. So, there are 2 graphs. In one graph, I want to describe magnitude of h of j omega, and in the other graph, I want to describe phase of h of j omega, and that will complete all information that I need about h, right? The x-axis is going to be omega. Now, the crucial thing to understand about Bode plots is that omega is in the log scale. Okay, so when I draw a Bode plot, suppose this is 1 radian per second, then this is going to be 10 radians and equally spaced is 100 radians per second. Okay, this is something very crucial about Bode plot. Because of this, it works. Okay, if you remove this, if you say that I'm going to make a linear scale of a plot, you can't really draw Bode plot at all. Okay, so this is the crucial thing. We are drawing omega, but it's in the log scale. We're not writing log of omega, just log scale. Alright? The second crucial important thing is that the y-axis or the magnitude is also in the log scale. So, in fact, what engineers prefer to do is instead of writing modulus of h of j omega, they write this particular point. This is basically h of j omega in decimals. So if h of j omega is has some unit, then it's decimals about modulus. This is the transconductance construction, this is the Siemens. So it's simply decimals about modulus. So these are the two crucial things that you need to understand about the graph. X-axis, both the x-axis are in the log scale, and for the magnitude plot, the y-axis is also in the log scale. That is not in the draw your curve. Alright? Okay. Now that we understand this, let's say h of s is equal to some gain times that there is an order in the values of this P1, P2, Z1, Z2 without any loss of generality. Let's say that P1 is less than P2, which is less than Z1, which is less than Z2. I can say this without any loss of generality. I want to give two cases of an example. And without any loss of generality, let's say that the other terms are not there. We have only these four terms. Alright? Depending on your needs, you can add or subtract terms in whatever you need. Or you can change the order of it. Now, this is the next crucial point about Bode plot. So far, it's very general. So there is nothing more approximate. The next crucial point that I'm going to mention, and this is one reason why Bode plot works, is that instead of this simple greater than symbol, I'm going to say that let's say that P1 is much less than P2, which is much less than Z1, which is much less than Z2. Okay? Bode plot works in such situations. This is the first time I'm making an approximation. P1 is going to be P2, it's a special case. We won't worry about it. Okay, or modulo P1 equal to modulo P1 and P2 are a conjugate complex function. Okay, let it be. You do that and look up books and do that. I'm not doing that. Okay, so let's say this is the situation. P1 is much less than P2, much less than Z1, much less than Z2. Now once again, you can choose your own order, as in whatever you choose. Okay, but they are much less than each other. Alright? Now, we are going to sweep the frequency. And as we sweep the frequency, we are going to talk about 20 times log of h of j omega. This is what we are going to talk about. This is our target function. We want to know this block. Now, 20 times log of h of j omega is equal to 20 times log of modulo h of j omega times e power angle there is a j here, j. So far so good. Logarithm of the product of two quantities is equal to log of h of 2. Is this correct? Log of e to the base 10. Right? Or is it 10 to the base 10? No, e to the base 10. Okay. So this is what we've got so far. Now this first quantity and this, so we are going to look at the first and the second term separately in two different graphs. The first term corresponds to my top graph, okay, and the second term is basically proportional to the bottom graph. It's not exactly equal, but it's proportional. Fine? So far so good? Okay, so let's try to look at 20 log of absolute magnitude of h of j omega. So term number 1. product of some quantities, logarithm of a product is addition of the logs. Now, one mistake that I've made over here is that we have forgotten to replace S by J omega. So please pardon me. I'm going to replace S by J omega in the last quantity. Yes? Huh? Negative. Go back to my plot. Let's first identify what are the values of P1, P2, Z1, Z2. So let's say this is my P1, this is P2, this is Z1, and somewhere over here is Z2. Okay? Now, when omega is much less than all four of these, then the value of 20 times absolute magnitude of inverse J omega is going to be 20 log A. Suppose now omega is greater than P1 but less than everything else. Suppose omega is between P1 and P2. What's going to happen? Only P1 term will be there, everything else is missing. So let's say omega is much greater than P1, but it's still much less than everything else. Then what's going to happen to the second particle? Okay. So 1 plus J omega by P1 look at this calculation. 1 plus J omega by P1, omega is much greater than P1, so that is going to be approximately equal to J omega by P1. Modulus of J omega by P1 is equal to omega by P1. what I've got over here is minus 20 log of omega by P1. Okay? And suppose we double omega. How much does this factor increase by? Log 2 is approximately equal to 6. So 6 dB. So if I double omega, my gain drops by 6 dB. If I make omega 10 times, then my gain drops by 20 dB. Okay, if I increase omega by 100 times, then my gain drops by 40 dB. So this slope between omega and the gain is negative 20 dB per decade. Every time you multiply omega by 10, the gain drops by 20 more dB. So we go back to our curve and we say that after P1, octave is a doubling of decade is 10 times. After P1, the gain drops by 20 dB every decade or 6 dB every octave. Agree? What happened? This one, where did you drop off? You see this red term over here. You understood this. Minus 20 log omega by P. If I increase omega 10 times, suppose I have some value, I take 10 times the value, then how much will this factor be? It will change by 20 degrees. Because we have made 10 times omega, 20 log 10 of 10 is equal to 20. Right? So every time you make omega 10 times, your gain is dropping by 20 dB. So that's called the slope is minus 20 dB per decade. Okay? Now when I hit P2, what happens? Another pole comes into the picture and now I get a slope of minus 40 dB per decade. What happens when I hit Z1? So the slope is going to increase and it's going to become just minus 20 dB per decade. And when I hit Z2, the slope is going to become 0. Is understood? Okay, so that's term number 1. We have already covered term number 1. Because now we have got conclusion from all 4 of these terms. The zeros are rising at 20 dB per decade, the poles are dropping at 20 dB per decade, so the net contribution is 0 dB per decade. Okay, so this is the way we draw the magnitude plot. The way we draw the phase plot, what do you think is going to happen to the phase? Do the same analysis, and now instead of looking at 20 log of h of j omega, I am going to look at angle h of j omega. Okay, this is fine so far so good. Now, let's say omega is much smaller than P1, P2, Z1, Z2. What is angle of phase? 0. I might as well delete it. Okay, so when omega is much smaller than P1, P2, Z1, Z2, the phase is 0 degrees. Alright, when omega is much greater than P1 but less than everything else, much less than Z1, Z2, everything else. So I just get minus 90 degrees because of P1. Omega is much greater than P1, so the first term becomes infinitely large. So angle of infinity J times infinity, angle of J times infinity plus 90 degrees. Okay? And then there is a negative sign, so you get minus 90 degrees equal to 4. Now, when omega is much greater than P1 and P2, but still much less than Z1 and Z2, then the bottom two terms contribute, the top two terms don't contribute. You get minus 90 from the first one, minus 90 from the second one, you get net minus 180 degrees. That's it. And then suppose Z1 and Z2 are positive quantities here. Then what's going to happen? Minus 90, minus 90, plus 90. So one of those minus 90 is being cancelled out. Okay? And because of Z2, it's going to go back to 0. Okay, suppose Z1 was negative. Right half plane 0. Then we get minus 270. You understand the difference between positive and negative? So depending on what sign Z1 and Z2 are, P1 and P2 are not going to have different signs. They are always going to have positive signs. Okay. You want left half plane poles. Zeros can be here and there. So depending on the sign of the zero, this is either going to, the phase is either going to increase or decrease. Okay? So this is basically how we draw the phase plot and the magnitude plot. Combined together, it's called the Bode plot. Both the magnitude and the phase. Okay, shall we stop here?